The development context of the Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D remake is fascinating because it reveals a bold decision by Square Enix and Team Asano. Not just to make a visual update, but to completely reimagine two of the most primitive and minimalist games in JRPG history. Producer Masaki Hayasaka makes it clear that the philosophy behind this project was radically different from the approach used in Dragon Quest III HD-2D remake, while in the third game the team avoided messing with the original too much and only added small embellishments. Here the philosophy was, we can change as much as we want, as long as the core of the game remains intact. This wasn't a random choice, but rather a pragmatic necessity. The first two Dragon Quest games are so basic in mechanics and narrative that a remake that only updated the graphics would be considered a waste of budget. The decision to develop the two games as a single package instead of separate releases also had very practical reasons that deserve to be highlighted. Hayasaka explains that releasing Dragon Quest I and II separately would create a series of complex problems related to pricing, player perception of how much content each game offers, and the spacing between releases. More importantly, releasing the two games together would allow Square Enix to complete the reimagining of the Erdrick trilogy more quickly and cohesively, closing the narrative cycle that began with Dragon Quest III HD-2D remake. It's a strategy that demonstrates commercial maturity and respect for the narrative arc that connects the three titles, even if it means that players won't have the same revelation experience that the original players had when they discovered that Dragon Quest III was connected to the first game. What impresses me most about this project is Team Asano's courage in embracing profound changes that many remake developers would avoid for fear of displeasing purists. The original Dragon Quest I was an extremely simple solo adventure, but in the remake, the team added battles with multiple enemies simultaneously and redesigned the entire game, taking this into consideration. More than that, they drastically expanded the narrative, which was practically non-existent in the 1986 game. Now, upon entering Erdrick's cave, you find a rival group of adventurers vying for the same blessings as you, and you can talk to them individually to discover they are survivors from a village destroyed by the Dragon Lord. It seems like a small change on paper, but it completely transforms the experience of playing Dragon Quest I, adding layers of emotional and social context that the original never had. The choice of the HD-2D visual style was not just aesthetic, but strategic and almost philosophical. Hayasaka argues that the more retro a game is, the more the HD-2D style reveals its true value. And since the first two Dragon Quest games are the most retro in the entire franchise, they are the perfect candidates for this visual treatment. It's an interesting perspective, because it inverts the common logic that older games deserve less investment. Here, antiquity is seen as an opportunity to create an even more impressive visual contrast. Team Asano's experience with Octopath Traveler and Live Alive gave Hayasaka the necessary confidence to embark on this ambitious project, especially after seeing how the HD-2D remake of Live Alive was well received by the public. One of the most challenging aspects of development was converting the original 2D environments to 3D while keeping the structure faithful to the 1986 and 1987 games. The team made a point of keeping the positioning of buildings and towns, and even the path of stairs and dungeons practically the same as the originals, so that veteran players could rely on their memories to navigate. This structural fidelity, while everything around is visually reimagined, required exceptional level design skills from the map and planning team. But the result allows the games to be both new and nostalgic at the same time. It's a delicate balance that few remakes manage to achieve, and it demonstrates a deep respect for the experience of players who dedicated hours to the originals almost 40 years ago. The expanded narrative is where the remake truly sets itself apart, and Hayasaka admits that working on the story was the project's biggest challenge. For RPGs, the story is the root from which everything else grows. The environments, character sprites, and other aspects are the branches and leaves that sprout from this root, so development cannot move forward until the story is defined. The narrative changes in this remake are substantial, including foreshadowing elements that were planted in Dragon Quest III HD-2D remake and are now resolved, as well as mysteries that are not addressed in the original games and twists that no one expects. The addition of the Princess of Kanak as a playable character in Dragon Quest II is a perfect example of this approach. She appears in the original game, is a descendant of Erdrick like the protagonist, and there had been fan speculation for decades about her becoming a party member. The team spent a lot of time in discussions and adjustments with Yuji Horii to ensure these changes would please the largest number of people possible, even knowing that it is physically impossible to satisfy every wish in a remake. The development also faced significant challenges of scope and decision-making, especially because opinions on what a remake should be vary enormously among players and developers. Hayasaka learned from Dragon Quest III that the more famous a game is, the greater the variety of expectations about what should be included and which approach would be best. Since the scope of the changes in Dragon Quest I and II is much larger than it was in the Dragon Quest III remake, the process of deciding which opinions to adopt and which to reject was considerably more difficult. The team was only able to finish the project because very reliable professionals joined the team during development, both internally and externally, weighing that without these people, Hayasaka believes the game would still be unfinished. It's a rare and honest admission of the real challenges of developing a remake that needs to balance innovation with preservation, modernization with nostalgia, and the expectations of multiple generations of players. Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake brings a classic narrative that founded the entire Dragon Quest franchise, and honestly, it's impressive how these stories remain relevant decades later. The first game establishes the legend of Erdrick, a legendary hero who defeated the Lord of the Underworld and brought peace to the land of Alefgard. This peace was ephemeral because the diabolical Dragon Lord resurfaced, spreading hordes of monsters throughout the kingdom again. You take on the role of a direct descendant of Erdrick, and this heroic lineage connection creates a genuine emotional weight. You're not just another hero. You literally carry the blood of the greatest warrior in history. Destiny is literally in your DNA, and this simple but powerful premise works perfectly to establish an epic journey of salvation. The narrative of Dragon Quest I unfolds in the land of Alefgard, a kingdom shaped by the goddess Rubis. And what makes this story unique is precisely its brutal simplicity. You travel alone, without teammates, facing terrifying creatures and meeting captivating characters along the way. The central goal is to defeat the powerful Dragon Lord once and for all. But there is an important emotional sublayer. You need to rescue Princess Gwaelin, who has been kidnapped. This seemingly basic narrative structure actually works magnificently, because every encounter matters more when you're alone against the world. The HD-2D remake adds many new events and elements according to producer Masaki Hayasaka, so even those who played the original will find fresh surprises in this reimagined version. Dragon Quest II elevates the narrative scale significantly, and this is where the saga truly gains generational depth. Many years have passed since Alefgard was saved by the hero of the first game, who received the title of Erdrick just like his ancestor. The descendants of this new Erdrick founded 3 prosperous kingdoms that flourished in times of peace. This world building is fantastic because it shows the direct consequences of the first game. Heroism has ramifications, creates dynasties, shapes entire civilizations. But darkness never sleeps, and a sudden invasion of evil monsters plunges the world into darkness again. Now you control not just one hero, but a group of young princes and princesses from Erdrick's lineage, expanding both the narrative scope and the gameplay. What fascinates me about this collection is how Dragon Quest I and II form a cohesive generational narrative within the so-called Erdrick trilogy. Dragon Quest III, which received its own HD-2D remake released earlier, actually takes place chronologically before the events of 1 and 2. So you can play 3 first and then continue the story in 1 and 2, completing the entire Erdrick saga in chronological order. Or you can treat this collection as a standalone adventure. This non-linear narrative structure gives incredible freedom to players. You choose how you want to experience this legend. And Square Enix acknowledges this connection by offering cosmetic rewards, dog and cat outfits, for those who have save data from Dragon Quest III, creating a tangible bridge between the games. Looking at it critically, the story of Dragon Quest I and II might seem too simple by modern standards. Evil versus good. Hero descended from a legend needs to defeat a powerful villain, rescue a princess, save the world. But this simplicity is precisely what makes these narratives timeless and universal. These games laid the foundation for all the JRPGs that came after. The heroic journey structure, the importance of lineages and destinies, the construction of worlds shaped by gods and monsters. Although the original games are not as appreciated as Dragon Quest III, there is a purity in their narratives that resonates even today. They are stories that don't try to be complex, but rather deeply satisfying on an emotional and mythological level. What the HD-2D remake brings that's special is the promise of adding new events and elements without mischaracterizing the original essence. Producer Masaki Hayasaka emphasized that both veteran fans and new players will find something to appreciate, and this demonstrates a genuine respect for the source material. Square Enix is clearly teasing a new twist that will add a lot of content that was not present in the original games, but keeping the central narrative structure intact. It's a delicate balance: modernize without disrespecting, expand without diluting. The setting in Alfgard remains. The journey of Erdrick's descendant remains, but now with additional layers of depth and context that the original games from the 80s couldn't offer due to technical limitations. Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake functions as a complete narrative package that tells a saga of generations, inherited heroism, and the eternal cycle between light and darkness. Being able to play both titles at any time from the start, Screen creates an interesting narrative flexibility. You choose which chapter of Erdrick's legend you want to explore first. This respectful structure allows each game to maintain its identity while being part of a larger whole. The classic turn-based combat of Dragon Quest returns in these remakes, but with changes that truly make a difference in the experience. The biggest transformation is in the first game. We now face multiple enemies simultaneously, something the original didn't have. This completely changes the dynamic of the battles, because it's no longer that 1 versus 1 where you simply attack and heal repeatedly. Now you need to think about priorities, which monster to take down first, whether it's worth spending area magic or focusing on them one at a time. This change might seem small on paper, but in practice it transforms Dragon Quest I into something much more strategic and less repetitive. The introduction of scrolls is another novelty that adds layers of depth to the progression system. These scrolls are found during exploration, hidden in treasure chests, and each one teaches a specific skill or magic to certain characters. In Dragon Quest I, the hero can learn the Dragon Slash, a devastating attack against dragons that makes all the difference against specific bosses. The interesting thing is that this creates a real incentive to explore every corner of the maps and dungeons, because you never know when you'll find that scroll that will completely change your combat strategy. It's an elegant way to reward curiosity without overloading the player with overly complex systems. In Dragon Quest II, the experience expands considerably with a complete party system that can have up to 4 active characters. Each member has their well-defined role. The Prince of Middenhall is the tank with powerful attacks like Knuckle Sandwich and Hatchet Man, and can also use Forbearance to protect allies. The Prince of Canik balances sword and magic, serving as support and healer, but also has the devastating Gigaslash. The Princess of Moonbrook is the offensive and support mage with spells like Oomph and Insulatal. The big news is the Princess of Canik, a playable character for the first time in the series, who masters frizz and crack type magic and is extremely agile and versatile. The sigil system adds a fascinating strategic layer to battles. There are 5 different types: sun, stars, moon, water, and soul, and each one influences combat in unique ways. The sigil of the sun, for example, makes some special abilities automatically cause critical damage, turning normal attacks into devastating blows. The sigil of the moon makes spells unpredictable, adding an interesting element of risk and reward. But the most impressive is the sigil of the soul, which activates enhanced versions of abilities like turning Dragon Slash into the powerful Double Dragon Slash. This system forces you to think strategically about when to use each sigil, creating decision-making moments that can completely turn a difficult battle around. The progression structure maintains that hardcore essence of classic RPGs, and Square Enix wasn't afraid to preserve that. Dragon Quest I especially is a more solitary and challenging experience, where you explore the world of Alfgard alone, guided by a mysterious voice that appears in your dreams. The journey begins in Tantagel, and from there you have to figure out where to go, who to save, how to obtain the Sphere of Light and defeat the Dragon Lord. There's no hand-holding all the time, no giant waypoints on the screen. It's genuine exploration where talking to NPCs and paying attention to the environment makes all the difference. For those who grew up with modern RPGs that guide the player constantly, this might be an initial shock, but it's precisely this sense of discovery that makes the experience memorable. Dragon Quest II introduces important new features in exploration, including brand new areas like underwater environments that didn't exist in the original games. Additionally, there's an optional hint system that shows enemy weaknesses during combat, making it easier to choose the most effective magic or attack against each type of monster. This is perfect for those who don't want to test every possible combination, or for moments when you just want to advance the story without getting stuck in experimental battles. Exploration continues to be rewarding, with dungeons hiding essential scrolls and sigils that completely transform your combat arsenal. The map is much more expansive than the first game, and having a full party totally changes the dynamic of how you face each challenge. The great trick of these remakes lies in balancing fidelity to the originals with modern improvements that really matter. We're not talking about completely reinvented games. The skeleton is the same, the hardcore essence remains, but now with quality of life that makes the experience more accessible without losing the challenge. The Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD-2D remake uses the famous HD-2D visual style that Square Enix has been perfecting since Octopath Traveler, and it must be admitted that this technique continues to be a brilliant choice for reviving classics. What makes this style so special is the way it manages to evoke nostalgia without looking dated, combining high-quality pixel art with detailed three-dimensional environments and modern lighting effects. It's that feeling of playing something you remember from childhood, but with a layer of contemporary polish that makes everything more cinematic and immersive. The choice to use this aesthetic for the first two Dragon Quest games wasn't just a technical decision. It was a declaration of love for the legacy of these games that defined the JRPG genre. The fusion of 2D sprites and 3D graphics is where the magic really happens in this remake. The characters and enemies are rendered in detailed pixel art, while the surrounding environments are built with three-dimensional geometry, creating an impressive depth that the original games simply couldn't deliver within the limitations of the original Nintendo. What fascinates me about this approach is how it respects the visual essence of the classic games while adding layers of detail that are only possible with modern technology. The scenarios gain rich textures, dynamic shadows, and a sense of scale that completely transforms the exploration experience. Walking through the towns and dungeons of Alefgard now feels like a true epic adventure, not just because of the gameplay, but because of the visual impact each location carries. The lighting effects are probably the most impressive technical highlight of this remake, and it's something that elevates the entire visual presentation to another level. The way light behaves in the environments, whether it's the soft glow of a torch in a dark cave, the reflection of the sun on the water in the new underwater environments of Dragon Quest II, or the dramatic lighting during boss encounters, adds a layer of atmosphere that simply didn't exist in the originals. These effects aren't just pretty. They completely change how we perceive the environments and create memorable visual moments that stick in your memory. It's the kind of detail you stop to appreciate, especially when exploring the new dungeons and brand new scenarios that were added exclusively for this version. The sprite animations during combat received special treatment that deserves recognition. Although the clashes still take place in the first person, following the series' classic tradition, the monster sprites now have more fluid and dynamic animations, with movements that convey weight and personality. Akira Toriyama's unmistakable art style comes to life in a way the original versions could never fully capture, with each creature, from the iconic slimes to the most menacing dragons, displaying visual details that do justice to the original design. The special effects for magic and abilities have also been completely revamped with bright particles, colorful explosions, and visual distortions that make every battle a visual spectacle without losing the clarity needed to follow what's happening. The new scenarios added to the remake demonstrate how much the development team understood the visual potential of the HD-2D engine. The fairy village introduced in Dragon Quest I, for example, is a visual treat with its unique architecture and vibrant color palette that contrasts with the darker areas dominated by the Dragon Lord. The completely new underwater environments in Dragon Quest II are even more impressive, with water effects, detailed underwater flora, and lighting that simulates the scattering of light through the depths. These new locations not only expand the narrative but serve as technical showpieces that demonstrate how much this visual technology has evolved since the first games to use the HD-2D style. The fidelity to Akira Toriyama's original art design is maintained with religious respect, but with all the advantages that modern resolution allows. Every monster, every NPC, every visual element maintains that instantly recognizable Dragon Quest identity. The medieval armor with a touch of fantasy, the monsters that mix cute with menacing, the towns that look like they're straight out of a European fairy tale. What HD-2D does is add depth and richness to these elements without distorting their essence. The sprites of the heroes and main characters are rendered with a level of detail that allows you to appreciate every nuance of the original design, while the 3D environments around them create a worthy stage for these iconic figures to shine. Compared to the Dragon Quest III HD-2D remake released earlier, these remakes of 1 and 2 maintain the same level of visual quality and use the same graphics engine, which ensures consistency across the entire Erdrick trilogy. It's impressive how Square Enix managed to maintain this visual cohesion between the three games, allowing them to function as a unified visual experience despite being released at different times. The HD-2D style proved to be the perfect choice for this classic trilogy, offering a perfect middle ground between nostalgia and modernity that pleases both veterans and new players. Visually, Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake is not just a graphical update, it's a complete reimagining that honors the past while embracing the possibilities of the present, transforming games that many consider dated into visual experiences that feel contemporary and timeless at the same time. Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake presents a solid advancement in performance on most modern platforms, with special emphasis on the versions for Nintendo Switch 2, PS5, and PCs with compatible hardware. Unlike the original games, which could feel slow and basic by today's standards, this remake delivers a more fluid experience visually and technically, making good use of Square Enix's updated Unreal Engine for HD-2D. On consoles like the Switch 2, the game maintains a stable 30 FPS in most areas, with noticeable visual improvements. While on PS5 and PCs, there is a real possibility of running at 60 FPS, which makes all the difference in terms of responsiveness and gameplay feel. The issue of loading times has also been greatly improved. On PS5, for example, loading is swift and barely takes the player out of the immersion, with steps that take a few seconds to open the map, start battles, or load areas. The Switch 2 also surprises in this regard, with times much lower than the regular Switch, coming very close to the performance of more powerful consoles. On PCs with fast SSDs, the performance is very comfortable, allowing for practically no waiting, which is ideal for those who like a more continuous experience without long pauses. It's interesting to note that the performance, while solid, isn't just a matter of numbers, but of how these more stable frames and fast loading times transform the feeling of revisiting a classic. The feeling is more modern and playable, different from what many might expect from reinterpretations of such old games. Still, the game maintains the structure of the originals, which brings a challenge. For those who appreciate the classic style, it might even seem quite rigorous, but for fans of the genre, the fluidity and HD-2D aesthetic more than compensate. Regarding limitations, it's worth mentioning that the remake doesn't offer robust quality-of-life options found in the Dragon Quest III HD-2D. The absence of auto-battle, for example, makes combat slower and more demanding, which might be a drawback for certain audiences. However, in terms of performance, the game is very competent, with few considerable drops even in areas loaded with visual effects. The solid performance aids in combat, maintaining the strategy and attention that the remake wishes to encourage, even if it means a more measured pace. In my personal opinion, playing Dragon Quest I and II in this remake is like revisiting an old work that has been carefully restored and didactically remade so that modern players can enjoy it without feeling the technical or visual wear and tear of the early days. Performance is one of the pillars for this to work, and honestly, it doesn't disappoint. I was surprised by the fluidity on Switch 2, something I didn't expect considering the limits of the first Switch. On PS5 and PC, the experience becomes even more immersive and responsive, giving a feeling that the game, despite being old, is revived and competitive in the current scene. Another positive point of the technical performance that caught my attention was the handling of graphic effects, lighting, and animations within HD-2D. The way the engine manages this without sacrificing performance is very impressive, creating a visual balance that enhances the artistic work. Scenes like castles with diffused lights gain a cinematic quality in the experience that I hadn't seen in many remakes of similar games, showing that Square Enix made a point of investing in this. The performance of Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake seems to me to be both a technical victory and a clear statement of respect for the series' origins, making the rereading of such old games viable without the common frustration of outdated versions. The experience of playing now is much more comfortable and attractive for new players, but it preserves challenges for those who enjoy the retro style. Definitely. Performance is one of the great qualities that sustain this reinterpretation. And for me, it was one of the reasons to recommend playing these versions to anyone who likes classic RPGs updated for the present time. The main point to consider is how connected you are to the Dragon Quest universe and the gameplay style these games provide. The remaster brings beautifully updated graphics and audio in the HD-2D style, a visual evolution that is very pleasing and brings that nostalgic charm with a cozy feeling, like being immersed in a timeless classic. However, the experience is intentionally faithful and faithfully old school, which can frustrate those expecting a more modern or fluid experience, as the games maintain the original design, which is more challenging and less intuitive than contemporary RPGs. If you are a collector or an enthusiast of the franchise, It's well worth it at launch. For those who are not in a hurry and are not hardcore fans, waiting might make sense to see reviews and possible updates, but true fans generally prefer to have this pair of classics in hand right away. Another important issue to consider is the style of play present in the two titles. Dragon Quest I is a solo adventure, very direct and perhaps simplistic for those used to modern RPGs, while Dragon Quest II already introduces a party system, but still maintains a basic and challenging approach. The gameplay is much purer and less tutorialized than current RPGs, requiring more patience and a desire for exploration from the player. This makes the remake suitable for those who appreciate games that demand traditional strategy and focus on classic turn-based combat without many contemporary gimmicks, being an experience that can be somewhat hardcore for more casual audiences. The game is mainly indicated for fans of classic RPGs and those interested in the history of the Dragon Quest franchise. Players who already enjoyed Dragon Quest III HD-2D Remake will find an interesting continuity, even if the first two games have their retrograde peculiarities. If you enjoy the HD-2D visuals of Team Asano's games, from Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy, this will be a visual feast, as the remake maintains that charming and detailed aesthetic that pairs well with the Dragon Quest universe. For players who want a challenging RPG with fewer concessions to modern fluidity, the experience is well worth it. My personal opinion on buying at launch is that, if you are a fan of the series and enjoy diving into classic RPGs, I see no reason to wait. The quality of the recreation is high, and it's a beautiful tribute to these pioneering games. For those who like to feel the original game, but with a revamped look that brings new life to the adventures, it's a purchase that satisfied my expectations. However, for those not very familiar with the old style of RPG, the game might seem less accessible compared to more modern titles, and in that case, it might be worth waiting for more detailed reviews from players with varied profiles. Furthermore, the bundle being unique for both games brings savings and a dual experience for fans, a point I consider very positive for those who like to enjoy long RPG journeys. The possibility of playing on portables like the Nintendo Switch 2 adds even more flexibility of where and when to play. Considering the investment, it's a package that delivers a legitimate and nostalgic experience with an updated presentation, something we rarely see with such quality in the market today for games of this era. So if you are a fan of games that built the foundation of modern RPGs, value HD-2D graphics that maintain the charm of traditional pixel art, and enjoy a classic challenge, Dragon Quest I and II HD-2D Remake is worth buying at launch. But if you prefer more modern RPGs with simplified and less demanding mechanics, or want to see how the community will react, waiting until there are more reviews might be wiser. For me, the wave of nostalgia and the care in production would make this purchase a natural choice, and I would recommend it to fans of the franchise who want to experience the roots of the series with a contemporary touch. Well, that was the video. I hope you liked it and see you next time.
But I don't need to see, so just tell me where to go, even though